Namaste and welcome to the Festival of Bharat. My name is Kamal Madi Shetty and you're tuned into season 4 of the Festival of Bharat. We are a platform that believes in having open and frank conversations about Bharat with no holds barred. And today we're going to discuss a very important topic and we have a very special guest with us, Shri Gopi Shankar Madurai ji. Gopi ji is a Dharmic, indigenous and equal rights activist. He's one of the youngest and the first openly intersex and genderqueer person to contest the Indian State Assembly elections. Gopi ji is an author, public speaker, and has represented India on a number of multilateral and global platforms. The Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment of the Government of India also appointed Gopi ji as the South Regional Representative of the newly formed statutory authority, the National Council for Transgender Persons. Gopi ji is also the founder of Citti Madurai Student Volunteer Movement. And he has many contributions and awards to his name. But let me welcome Gopi ji. Namaste, Gopi ji, and welcome to the Festival of Bharat.
Namaste. Namaste, Kamalji. And thank you for Festival of Bharat for having me. Yes.
Thank you so much, Gopi ji. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Gopi ji, I want to begin with my first question, and that is on the very terminology of LGBT. Now, you're somebody who has spoken about this before, so I want to understand from you what are the issues with the terminology around LGBT? Is it very Eurocentric? What are the kinds of issues that come to your mind?
So the present terminology, what we are using is LGBT, which means lesbian, gay, bisexuals, and transgender people, which is, of course, an American terminology and highly Eurocentric and Western, a term which originated from the global north, which is not kind of inclusive towards a number of indigenous, sexual orientation, gender identity expression, and sex characteristics. So what we call as SOGI SC identities. In the recent days, we are using the term, in the policy level discussions, we are using the term SOGI SC, that is SOGI and SC. So the SO in SOGI represents sexual orientation, and the next is GIE, that represents the gender identity and expression, and the SC in SOGI SC represents sex characteristics of a person. Basically, we don't know the difference between, including medical practitioners don't know the difference between the term, sex and gender identity and sexual orientation and sex characteristics, etc. So no infant is born as a transgender person, because transgender is a gender identity. Gender identity is something which evolves, which should be raised as it constitutes of n number of attributions. But sex identity is something, which comes from your birth, for example, you can self-determine your gender identity, but you cannot self-determine your sex characteristics or your sex identity, because you never decided to be assigned as male at birth, right? So even we see a lot of application forms and a lot of application forms, a lot of things in which we have this option saying that sex, to refer sex, they will give man and woman. Actually, man and woman refers to the gender identity of a person. When you're giving sex, they need to give it as male and female. So even in our Puranas or everything, because the term sex or gender identity, everything, whatever we say, it is in English. English itself is not even 1,500 years old language. Highly heteronormative language with its own binary notions. So in our texts or many things, we see a lot of indigenous names and a lot of things, especially for us, sex is just two, that is male and female. But when it comes to gender identity, it is quite fluid in our society. And our dharma always upheld that sex identity of a person is male and female. And but when it comes to the gender identity, it was very fluid. It was man, woman, transgender people, and we have genderqueer people, and under that we have n number of gender identities. Even same goes with the sexual orientation of a person, whom a person is emotionally, romantically, physically involving with. Also, we know about heterosexuality, but apart from heterosexuals, asexuals, bisexuals, and pansexuals, like this, we have more than 15 types of sexual orientations. um, we don't use the exact terminologies in, or we cannot see the exact terminologies in Sanskrit, but there are a lot of terminologies in Sanskrit, um, which may represent the emotion, or the etymological sense behind the word actually. Coming back to the question you asked, the term LGBT, yes, it is highly limiting because it is not, kind of accommodating n number of indigenous gender variant identities, or sex characteristics or sex identities, because even before this term originates, we have several indigenous identities and terminologies and social stratifications, right? And also the most important thing about the term LGBT is that, who invented it, for what purpose, and what this identity kind of encompasses, or like, whom it represents, and who defines whom it represents, right? Because when such terminologies evolve, like there will be an economy around it, there'll be a kind of a social stratification around it. Certain terminologies and identities are established for a political reasons. Of course, when it comes to the term LGBT, the people who belongs to the diverse SOGI SC identities, people who belong to diverse, sexual orientation, gender identity expression, sex characteristics, etc., should, have equal rights, their identities, to help them to, go beyond the very kind of expandable list of identities in the society. And it should help them, help the society not to be stereotypical, or like, have a kind of a prejudiced ideas. But when it comes to this particular terminology, it itself is evolving from a space where it is highly, kind of because what we call as indigenous traditions, in here, is that anybody who, venerates, or worships or celebrate, or have a kind of a devotion to their selfless ancestor, anybody who have devotion to their selfless ancestor, who consider their selfless ancestor as God, is part of indigenous tradition. Anybody who considers, Mother Nature as, have devotion to Mother Nature as Mother Goddess, is indigenous. Anybody who have devotion to, God itself, the concept, or the very kind of aspect, or the etymological sense of the term God itself, it's highly masculine, and it's a highly Christianized term. um, it's, but if anybody is approaching the term with a devotion that the God itself is a kind of, in a kind of a, mother form, with a motherhood which goes beyond the, gender identities, which goes beyond the very kind of, because you don't need to be a woman to be a mother. That's the kind of, the dharmic value we follow here. So these three things, having devotion to selfless ancestors, or worshipping nature as, God, or especially, considering God as mother figure, it is prohibited in Abrahamic traditions. So when we see this whole heteronormative English language, the way it evolved and the way it is kind of, used between different communities, you know, because, the language itself is spreading during the very kind of colonial era, and like it is going around, and like I don't want to get much into it because um, this particular terminology is limited, very limited terminology, because it comes with a very kind of um, a supremacist or kind of like you know um, the term gives upper hand to a certain race, certain ethnicities, and certain communities, whereas the other vulnerable communities and other form of civilizational values and indigenous names and the tradition and the identities are invisibilized because of this terminology.
Right, Gopiji. That's very interesting, and thanks for sharing that perspective. Because my next question actually follows from that, and that is, what is the dharmic view of about all of the various issues we've talked about, uh, more generally gender diversity. You've talked about how, as a culture, as a civilization, we have celebrated gender diversity, and there are many. There's a lot of evidence to this. How do you look at the dharmic view of gender diversity?
See, before, many Abrahamic traditions took over this world, because the word, religion comes from, religare, or like the etymological sense of the word, popularized during crusades by the church, or because be it the term religion or the caste or whatever we are using now, these are highly biased terminologies, because the terminology is incomplete. It's like, because these are the terminologies which were invented with a political purpose to keep some people below in the rank, or below their feet. So it's because, like, for example, dharmic, in the sense like, I consider all indigenous traditions in the globe, and I also feel that, Bharatvarsha is not limited to, like, Himalayas to Kanyakumari or Northeast to here. Like, Bharatvarsha is everywhere, the Native Americans' land is also, India or Bharatvarsha for me. And whether it is Australia or the native Australians, or the native, Kiwis, the Maoris, or the native Africans. So it is, they are, like, when they are Indic, when they are rooted to their soil, when they see that they are their ancestors, they are their ancestors, then they are Hindus, right? So our dharmic perspective is something which is, because which cannot be defined by an individual, right? So which cannot be defined by a single sampradaya, right? Because even in marriage, we have Shatapatha Brahmana. Not every single person who, I mean, Hindu person who is getting married is following Shatapatha Brahmana. There are different types of weddings. At least there are 7 different kind of categories are listed. So, but all of them are Hindus, you know, just because, Ravana being, opposite to Sri Ravana, or Lankeshwara being, opposite to, Sri Ram in the battle, doesn't make, Sri Lankeshwara bad, or Sri Ram, because there is no, we don't believe in this binaries, right? Because when you see even Sri Lankeshwara, his own, greatest ancestors are Manu. When you see his uncle is Agastya, or when you see the way Pulastya's, the Maharishi Pulastya's descendants coming down, because he comes from that lineage. Right. At the end of the day, be it Sri Rama or be it Sri Ravana, the both of them comes from either Ikshvaku or Somakul. So both of them are kind of, descendants of Mahakashyapa, we believe. So at the end of the day, we don't have something called evil or good, or, such diverse dharmic tradition um, had spaces. Like, for example, when you see, for example, Arvan tradition, the Kutandava worship, Arjuna getting married to, Krishna, Sri Krishna, getting himself, coming as a Mohini, and, kind of getting betrothed to Arjuna's son, Arvan, or the way, the concept of Shankar Narayana, because these are highly adhyatmic. We cannot blatantly kind of turn them into a kind of a Comic-Cons, or a Superman hero, He-Man, like a characters, or like some Greek or Roman or Hellenistic, you know, characteristics, because it has a lot to deal with, like your emotions and the way you connect with them, your bhava, your rasa, how you serve them, the very kind of bhakti you have for them. So it is basically, if you are going in an adhyatmic path, you need to kind of cross everything in your life, right? You need to cross various types of labels, and like you need to kind of, okay, I'm removing this label, I'm removing this label. So it's like, so I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this, I'm not that. So simply you cannot say I'm not this or I'm not that, right? So you need to feel it, you need to live in it to understand that. So all these people who are part of this diverse, sexual orientation, gender identity, sex characteristics, or whom we otherwise call as, the LGBTQIA plus communities, um, you know, uh, we had a very kind of adhyatmic approach for them, because our dharma believed, irrespective of, man or a woman, or a transgender person, etc., etc., or irrespective of a male or a female or an intersex child. Intersex children are not, transgender people. Intersex is the sex characteristics. It refers to the sex characteristics of the person. So irrespective of male, female, or intersex, they need to go beyond their identities. So, because in our tradition, a lot of sannyasi sampradayas, are not allowed to wear sacred thread, because they need to renounce everything. They need to renounce that they are Homo sapiens, or they need to even renounce that they are sannyasis. Uh, so it's like, you're getting into some kind of a world where you don't have a label, because the world thrives on selling labels. The world thrives on exploiting labels. The world functions because of the labels. But when you kind of throw that label away, everything stops for a minute. So we were the very first people to encourage it. Buddha was the very first missionary, we can say, you know. But Adi Shankara, kind of, when it came to him, he skipped everything in the middle and he jumped. But he never kind of, all these people never saw, okay, whether he is a male or a female and all that, Uh, even whether it is Bauddha Dharma, or even before Bauddha Dharma, Jaina Dharma, or, after all, there's a recent one is, Sikh Dharma. uh, all these dharmas have their very kind of unique space. It may be recognized by certain acharyas or may not be recognized by certain acharyas, but naturally it evolved to accommodate all such people. For example, the world first, trans men who underwent phalloplasty, um, when Alan Turing, who, because of him, the World War II came to an end. Uh, when he was compelled to commit suicide in UK, most importantly, um, you know, this person called Dr. Michael Lawrence Dillon, who was assigned as female at birth, which means, she lived as a woman for a while. But this person had to flee from Britain because they were persecuting, um, people with different sexual orientation and gender identities. So Britain was so binary at the time, so she had to flee to India, and she went to Ladakh, and she is, I think, 15 years elder to Dalai Lama, probably. And at the time, Mao's, persecution, we all know what happened to Tibet, right? Something horrible, and what Mao did to Tibet, and like whole Tibet, went down. So Dalai Lama came inside India, and she was very much inspired by, oh, I'm very much inspired by this beautiful philosophy. So there's Adhyatmic values. So let me just, be a monk here. So she went to Ladakh in the Vajrayana tradition. She was accepted, and she became he, but the ordained name is Lobsang Jivaka. You know, I mean, uh, how many LGBT organizations or the people who talk about the histories here know about this? Lobsang Jivaka, who is Dr. Michael Lawrence Dillon, who kind of underwent the first ever phalloplasty for, female transitioning to live as a man, that is FTM or F2M, or trans men, whom we call, or transitioned men. So, this person lived in India, and even now, a female cannot become a pope. A female cannot be a priest in the Catholic Church, whereas she was ordained as a sannyasi in a Vajrayana Buddhist tradition in Ladakh, in a Himalayan region. And see the connection that, she's connecting herself with the trauma these Tibetans are undergoing. And she is seeing that how great this culture is. And the monks who are giving ordination to her, him, I'll be using him hereafter to refer Lobsang Jivaka. Him, they never bothered about this person is a female or a male or all that. This person is more adhyatmic, this person is spiritual, so let me ordain this person. So that is something, like this, we have a lot of beautiful stories, not just stories, lived experiences and civilizational values. Each part of Bharat, whether, Hindus like it or not, we have our own temples, gods dedicated to us. We call them and celebrate them with our own names. We have our own festivals. We have our own language. We have our own identities without commercializing it, without politicizing it. These identities, indigenous identities, were established to uplift our inner values, especially the inner peace, not get inside the materialistic aspect of, it, and, going to a road and holding a placard with nonsense, words like, yeah.
Right. Very, very fascinating, Gopiji. Thank you for sharing those insights. Um, I mean, if I could just continue from what you were just ending at, and that is my next question. And this is about the present day activism. And you have, in fact, written an article a few months ago, in fact, which is titled "How Woke Activism is Killing the Queer Cause in India." Right? This was about a few months ago. What do you mean by that? How is, woke activism? Why is it problematic?
um, you know uh, Woke activism, I don't go with the term woke activism or activism too. When because see, um, we have a lot of problem, but we are still a democratic country. We are the largest democratic country. For me, I think we are the only democratic country because no other country is as diverse as Bharat. As diverse as Bharat. I have traveled to so many countries. I'm 29 now. I have traveled extensively past, 7 to 10 years, and have been visiting places and for various conferences or meetings. I have established ecosystems, or I was a co-founder of this organization called Intersex Asia, one of the founding member, for which we raised a lot of donations. Also, I introduced something called fellowships on various levels to develop training programs, and like we were very, very, very apolitical in all those. We were focused more on the struggle and the trauma the community undergoes, or like so. You know, the woke activism is something which is pushing a kind of foreign agenda here. Because we as a country, we have a problem, we have issues, but the solution should be indigenous. It should come from our own people. It's not technology we are borrowing, from certain countries. In the era where knowledge war is happening, which is worse than nuclear war, which is kind of destabilizing everything, because certain organizational structures, what we see, which is working against the integrity of Bharat, which is working against the integrity of Hindu Dharma, which want to destroy Hindu Dharma or Hindus, are their civilizational values or indigenous traditions around the globe. Because every single indigenous persons or are the traditions you see around the globe is highly Christianized, highly, Abrahamic traditions have occupied it. They are no more indigenous. Maybe in their dress or in certain type of languages, they may be indigenous, but nothing indigenous left to them. Whatever their forefathers or their great ancestors were, they are not carrying the same spirit. They are carrying a kind of a Christian spirit, or a kind of a kind of a monotheistic, or a kind of a spirit. The point here is that coming back to the issue is that we see a governance which is bigger than the India's government. The bureaucracy, which is bigger than the Indian government's bureaucracy, is working on a larger scale, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari to, the 8 directions, like 4 directions and the other sub 4 directions, other sub directions, including your next door, so-called non-governmental organizations or civil societies, which is working for so-called human rights, is connected to these oak activists. These oak activists are not connected to the ground reality, grassroots. They are, it's like, we have a lot of nepotism in social, service. Instead of social service, we call it as social work. And especially, for example, in this field, we are also kind of seeing the multi-billion-dollar economy which is pouring in. We see, so I prefer calling them as lipstick activists. Like wearing a lipstick. There is nothing wrong in wearing lipstick. Anybody who love lipstick, they can wear it. Those days we had this gulab, and like we used to rub it, and like we used to put it irrespective of male or female or whatever gender it is. If you like to wear lipstick, wear it. And this has nothing, I'm not, offensive, but the lipstick activism is something, you're just wearing it on your lips and wiping it off. That's it. It's like these group of activists are so influential, dangerously influential. So, for namesake, we have our government, but they take decisions. So they work on Dalit rights, disability rights, and women rights, and every single issues you see, which is connected to humanities, is controlled by them. The whole ecosystem, if you see in Delhi, the way certain groups of feminists, they control the so-called feminist narratives. None of these people will include Madhu Kishorji as part of their discussion. Madhu Kishorji, who started the India's first feminist magazine or all that. So these are the type of woke activists,
Gopiji, can you tell us about the issues that some of the foreign funding brings in? When there is, you've written about it, I believe, but when there is a lot of foreign funding, it sort of becomes like a barrier for some who are on the ground who are not able to access that. Their voices are somehow drowned out in the larger scheme of things. So does that also sort of exacerbate some of these
Yeah,
problems?
absolutely. Because see, the point here is that, for example, we have a gigantic corporate civil society coming and swallowing, street vendors, like, small ecosystems and NGOs. It's like literally you are buying activists with millions of rupees. Be it, CAA or NRC or, Article 370 issue, the way these people are structured, the way these people have structured their funds, you know, it is like highly problematic, highly unethical, you know, it is highly biased. It's like a multi-million dollar business. Even if you're going to run a kind of a multinational company, you will not get that much money. I mean, like I'm not paid a single penny for like 12 years. We were the longest floating, LGBTQI or the SOGI youth volunteer movement, youth-led movement in India. We have been surviving without even a proper office, and like the impact we have on the communities or the policy making and the law making, even before the BJP government come into the picture, we were existing from the last government was there, and like we have been engaging with them too. And um, we don't even own an office, but when you see like people who came before 2 years or 3 years, they own an apartment, they own a farmhouse. They own farmhouse in Delhi. They own apartments in Delhi. Like lavish thing. Like it's like uh, it's like the ecosystem is quite strong, and we also see um, like because earlier only for example, on one hand we had extremists like Wahhabists or like PFI like people or like fundamentalists, Islamic people from whom we faced a lot of challenges. We had radical Christians who were like, converting mass, in mass, people, in mass numbers. We had problem with them. And we had this atheists, political parties. Tamil Nadu is very famous for, like all the stupid atheists political parties which are useless. And but 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 when you see all this is connecting to this ecosystem now with this ecosystem, we have Communist Marxist Party, DMK joining in, Congress joining inside, and every single party from yesterday's organization. So you see the number of organizations they put through outside to spread kind of misinformation about varna or caste or jati or whatever you want to call it, about that, in US. And none of these people will talk about, you know, um, the great, leaders from the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes community who upheld Hindu values, like Dr. M.C. Raja or Ayan Kali or Swami Sagajananda from Tamil Nadu. A lot of people, like, they will not talk. They don't want to talk about them. So they have their agenda. They will go with that. So now with their agenda in this, we have this oak activists, and we have this, like. Um, this group of people, everybody is joining in here because when I commented about Kashmir is integral part of India, then people call me Islamophobic. Oh my God, did I said something about Islam? Then how can you call me as Islamophobic? I told the US so-called LGBT activists, like the intersex activist, you know, uh, you are homogenizing Kashmir as a Muslim land. I told her, how dare you can, erase the indigenous identities and invisibilize the various, indigenous traditions of Kashmir under Islam. Even before Islam, we had a tradition there.
It makes me wonder, because on one side of things is the way things are structured, the way things are organized. But on the other side, when these things actually hit the street, hit the ground, in the form of, protests and activism, placards, even, uh, there is a sense of very misplaced priorities, right? So there is the kind of things sometimes some of these activists have been advocating for may not be something that people in India either need or really should be prioritizing. So is there also a case of misplaced priorities when it comes to some of these activists?
I'll tell you something. If a person want to, if a male want to become a trans woman, if a male want to transition as a woman, in this traditional Hijra Jamaat system, Jamaat is a place where they live together. The male who want to become a Hijra need to pay at least, 2.5 to 3 lakh rupees, which is around 2,000 US dollars at least, 2,500 US dollars at least, which is a huge money, even for people living in US. So you need to do begging to pay that. After you pay that money, why are you paying it to them? Because your parents are not accepting and you're running away from your home. And when you find kind of refugee or like kind of asylum with this group of people, they kind of provide you shelter for which you need to give this money to them, and they will allow you to perform this gender affirming surgery. Once they're allowing this person to perform the gender affirming surgery to this particular person who is transitioning as a woman, trans woman, um, this person, then they will be domesticating them into prostitution and begging. How many of this so-called woke activists, or people with misplaced priorities know this? I'll tell you what is misplaced priority first. For example, in India we have 15,000 plus intersex infants who are born with sex reproductive system which cannot be easily classified as male or female. So the doctors need to run through karyotyping tests to understand the phenotype and genotype of the infant to kind of assign a sex to the infant. In this due process, the babies are made to undergo, sex selective surgery through which cosmetically the infant's reproductive organ are, made to look like male or a female. It is happening everywhere in the world.
Right, right.
But we became the second country to ban such surgeries. We are the first country to have a legal regime, a strong legal regime to protect intersex infants and children. The Madras High Court Madurai bench has passed a wonderful judgment to uphold the rights of these intersex infants and children. How many of these activists spoke about intersex infants and children who are vast in number? And do we have a medical protocol? Do we have a regulated guidelines? If we are going to go against up in arm against the medical practitioners, then it was impossible. I would have not sat with the medical practitioners or the director of medical education and the health secretary and the other people to draft a government order to ban the sex selective surgeries in Tamil Nadu, a state with 80 million population, right? So and the other most important thing is that before 3 days, a 14 years old boy left their home because the parents didn't want to accept the child. But when this boy is going to Jamaat, the Hijra Jamaat kind of made him to go for begging initially, but then like later on the day, same night, he was made to drink alcohol. And then what a 13, 14, 15 years old child see in such Jamaat is condoms. physical relationship, ensuring childhood for all children, irrespective of their, sexual orientation, gender identity, or caste identity, or whatever identity it is. That is important. Is this their priority? No. Their misplaced priorities are Kashmir is not part of India. Assam should be separated from India. Tamil Nadu should be separated from India. Everything should be separated from India. Abrogating 370 is like a darkness for queer community. The LGBT community in Kashmir is struggling, as if before 370 abrogation, they had gay pubs and bars and people were dancing on the road there, like stupidity, at most stupidity it is. Like, the point here is that their misplaced priorities have paved way for n number of anti-Hindu, anti-indigenous, anti-civilization groups to surrogate their ideas in India. Such Delhi-based organizations, when you see Queer Muslim Project, this guy who's running this, he was a mercy petitioner for Ajmal Kasab. And people want to normalize terrorist narratives. Do the grand imam, the grand mufti of Sunni Islam in India, who is in Kerala, will he accept this? No, he will not accept it, because he denounced Wahhabism, because he denounced PFI-like organizations. He has his own problems to deal with. The point I'm telling you is that these people who are running the Queer Muslim projects, they have a huge connection with the UK-based anti-Hindu, groups which ran the protest in front of the embassy. The way these funds are structured to several such organizations without FCRA, through fiscal sponsorship. For example, if your organization have an FCRA, mine don't have that. Even though, for example, you say that your organization is working on education, but you have an FCRA, whereas my organization is working on Kashmir and all that, my FCRA is cancelled, still I can get the money from you, reroute the money from you. Apart from that, I can also get individual payments for which we don't have any regulation. So such monies were funded, and like this people, this ecosystem were integral part of organizing Shaheen Bagh, Bhima Corrigan, Rohit Vemula's death was orchestra, like the way people orchestrated it. They never stood for Dalit Hindu athlete Shanti Soundararajan, who was kept nude for more than 7 hours in Doha Asian Games. Where this award Wopsy gang went, she was working in a Brooklyn for less than $1.50. Where this idiots went. The point here is that this present government sponsored Tudi Chand's case to be represented in Court of Arbitration for Sports, because of which the Rio Olympics became the first Olympics which took place without sex verification test. In sports, only women need to undergo sex verification test. I mean, like, of course, men do underwent, but then like not as much as women, So the way these people are humiliated, especially these women are humiliated, we worked for them. So their misplaced priorities never advocated for real change. Their misplaced priorities is not bringing out any constructive activism. Their misplaced priorities are kind of, circling around a kind of a destructive activism and narrative. They are becoming so powerful in international forums because a lot of countries with vested interests want to kind of use them as puppet, or like pour in money to them, and then like they represent the so-called communities they are saying, and without bringing any change on the ground, in a country where talking about reproductive health is, kind of still a huge challenge in the rural schools or village schools, or even in many urban schools, like how many science teachers. But then, so they want to talk about, like how to use female condoms in Tahur International Schools, but not just talking about that, show, like, then why the hell we are not showing pornography to these children? Like we, kind of see the way, I'm not talking about moral policing, I'm talking about ethics. we don't have, these are the people who don't have any kind of ethics in their life.
Right, Gopiji, I think it's very fascinating, and I think ironically, the ISIS in West Asia, if we look at the ISIS, the way it deals with people is throwing people off the rooftops, and ironically, it's the same kind of people that a lot of these groups tend to create sympathy for, be it in Palestine, be it in different places. The kind of terrorist groups that there is a tacit sort of a sympathy that is being generated, like you said. I think it's
The sad thing is that a Palestinian gay person or lesbian person will not support Israel. A lot of them. But
yes,
Israel is the country which allows gays and lesbians to openly serve in their defense.
yeah,
But let Muslims have their own spiritual groups.
right,
If it is spiritual, I'm happy.
right.
A real spiritual person cannot hurt any other religion, I believe. If they are kind of monotheistically, spiritual in a very jihadist sense, to have a kind of a soft power over all these narratives,
Right.
that is highly problematic, because um, faith communities having a space for themselves, irrespective of their religion accepting them or not, is important.
Right.
But are this faith community spaces, or real faith community spaces which is talking about faith? No, they are not talking about faith, because it is turning us a space for Al Qaeda or ISIS, because Al Qaeda and ISIS are far better, because we know them, they are Al Qaeda, because they're not in disguise, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gopiji, for sharing that. You know, I want to, actually ask you about one of the things you mentioned in your comments, and that is, or rather hinted to, and that is the transgender protection policy. Now, this is a policy that was brought in by the government, but like like with a lot of actually beneficial causes, this actually faced some kind of resistance, I believe, from a section of activists. But I mean, putting aside the activists for a moment, can you tell us about what the transgender protection policy entails, and how what kind of an impact does it have on the community?
See, again, few people from, Tamil Nadu, some of my friends, of course, sadly, who have a very opposite political views. They have sold themselves to Communist Marxist Party, or like, and they want to call themselves as Ambedkarites by, and their Ambedkar right, their Ambedkarism has a lot to do with Lenin and Marx and Mao and Chinese government, and the Marxist Communist Party's headquarters than Baba Sahib Ambedkar, or the Buddha Dharma, or the Dharmic values which he is talking about. So, for example, these activists were brought to Delhi, and like they were trained, and like more than like crores of money were invested. Like such the Hijra Nayaks. Like I earlier told you that if if I want to become a Hijra, like I need to pay 2.5 to 3 lakh rupees. That is $2,000 to $3,000 to some the Hijra Nayak, and then like this person will kind of allow me to do the reassignments, gender affirming surgery, and then like after that they'll be forcing me into the prostitution and begging. We have a person who completed her MBBS studies in Madurai Government Medical College with 67 percentage. She is forced into prostitution, and she don't want to come out of it, because she's threatened by them, and like she don't know, once you enter that, there is no escape. This is happening in this 21st century, where we talk about BLM and all these things. And those activists who protested in Delhi, they were like warriors against caste atrocities, and like they were closely associated with Equality Lab, or like Project Mukti, or all this a lot of, kind of self-proclaimed, you know, Dalit, Dalit rights movements or whatever it is. Mm, I don't know how many Dalits they really served. Most of them will be political, Dalits than the actual, so when you see these people, they never question the systematic oppression within this community. They legitimized it. The media simply followed it, from New York Times to the Times of India to the Hindu to every single newspaper, the Hindustan Times, and every single newspaper, every single idiotic opinion maker who didn't know the ground reality, who don't understand the trauma, of what I went through, this community members went through, sitting on glass towers, writing opinions. The bill, which was introduced by the BJP government, did had a lot of issues with the definitions, because they failed to differentiate the difference between sex characteristics and gender identity and expression. That is, they thought intersex and transgender people to be same, which is unscientific. But it was later rectified. We are also still working on various issues related to the act, which is no more a bill now. When the bill in the earlier format, like, the earliest bill, when we see the private members bill, it was introduced by Trichy Shiva, one of my friend, of course. She drafted it, and I also gave inputs to the bill, and I also introduced this DMK MP to some of our friends. So then, like, they also supported him. But his legislation was not practical. Policies, or policies, when they are practical, when they are not practical, they are mere papers. It is useless. So um, huge protest, went there, and like, from Human Rights Watch to every single organization, American watchdogs to every single international organization, from this, I don't know what UNHRC High Commissioner know about all this insider's perspective. She also, loosely kind of released certain statements against the bill and all that. None of these people know that a kind of a grand mafia, works around these people, and then they push them into prostitution and begging. Majority of the people are doing begging and prostitution because of that. My friend Swapna and me protested on the road in 2012 and again in 13, because she was not allowed to appear for UPSC. Later in TNPSC, she was allowed to appear, and she became the India's first trans woman gazetted official. She's the first transgender person to write the state civil service examination as a transgender person. She is posted as assistant commissioner for commercial tax department in Shivagangai district. She lost sub-collector posting in 15 marks. I mean, there are trans women, people like her, living with us. She didn't have money to buy her books. Some women working in Anganwadi who lost a child, she paid the fees of Swapna, not her community members. Our community is our first enemy. So the present BJP's legislation is the first legislation which penalize the very kind of, parents who have transgender children, who kind of, abandon, if they are abandoning their child, they are abandoning their son or a daughter just because they have a transgender identity, they will be punished under this law. If a transgender person cannot acquire a property, if a transgender person cannot be allowed inside if they are facing discrimination while joining in a university or college or school, wherever, this law can be used. Um, you know, After 8 years, with the help of this law, I helped a trans woman to get her property, mother's share of her property. Which is after saying that, a lot of trans women came and said, like, oh, we need to get our properties too. So 8 years of struggle. Can you imagine? Like, so there are a lot of good things like that. For example, like a 14 years old child, left the home and the parents don't want to keep them. um, okay, like we cannot simply, okay, we can also kind of impose certain law on them, but where are we going to keep this child? Like after we made the child to appear in front of the child welfare committee, who are clueless about non-binary and transgender children. After making them to appear, they are sending the such children back to the Jamaat system, where they will be going and begging and doing sex work. So where this law is helping, will help us to establish shelter homes for non-binary children, transsexual children, trans children. mm, you know it will help the future to not get inside this horrible kind of Jamaat system, the Hijra Jamaat system, or a transgender Jamaat system, or Haveli system, which will force them into prostitution and begging. So people legitimized this Jamaat system, begging and you know prostitution. They want the government to nationalize begging and prostitution. How come any government in the Western countries also can do it?
Right.
The point is that when this bill, that's why, Satyameva Jayate, like that we say, right? So whatever is truth, it won in the end of the day, thousands of people protested, only less than like very few people supported this. But at the end of the day, already it is a law now. Protection, Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019, hereafter it will be referred as law. Hereby, it's like we are already using the sections for, like, I've been handling 36 cases. I'm not paid for handling all these cases. I don't even have an office to handle too many stuffs I'm handling here. But how come we can legitimize a system which is forcing more than 2.5 crore people to into begging and prostitution through this Jamaat system? If the Jamaat and the Jamaat system, the transgender and Hijra Jamaat system or Havelis are like heaven to these people, how many of them, were allowed to, go and study in an educational institution or complete their studies? A person who completed her MBBS, who appeared for NEET examinations and completed her, MBBS in a government medical college in Tamil Nadu, which is tougher than getting inside IIT, with 67 percentage. At present, she is doing brothel. We don't want people to get inside such system. And we are trying to do something ethical, because uh, the government need to focus on the welfare, and they need to confer the constitutional rights. They cannot, kind of give them a comfortable life. They need to take care of their comfortable life. Government is not there to give comfortable life to people. Government or the policies must meet the basic necessities. Of course, we have problem in meeting the basic necessities, and the present government is rigorously working on it. From digitalizing the payments to the transgender people during this Corona, time, to every single aspect you see with the present governance. Of course, I do have problem with certain bureaucrats, but then like we sit and work with them. This is constructive activism.
Right. Right. Uh, Gopiji, in the last, especially in the last 6 years, if you see a lot of activism, you look at, platforms like Instagram, or you look at social media in general, there is
Yeah.
this, very strong tendency to portray this government, especially a Hindutva government, and not just the government, but also, Hindutva in general, or, even the color of saffron, as the villain, something that is working against, these communities. But when you actually look at the record of various political parties, it's actually the opposite, right? You look at the Congress government, you look at so many other governments. So how do you look at these political and the partisan sort of positioning of a lot of this activism? How do you look at that?
See, for 60 years or whatever time we had this Congress government in power, um, what they did, we never see them kind of, changing their Facebook cover pictures or images, rainbow pictures, during this American Pride Month. And like, I don't know what is, this American Pride Month, like, I'm proud and proud, I don't even like the word pride. I go with the word saying like, I'm humbled about certain identities and like all that, because my gender identity, my sexual orientation, my sex characteristics, my gender expression are one important aspect of my life. That is not everything about me. That is not the only identity which is defining what is Gopi, right? So one of the most important aspect here is that we see the way Congress, kind of dealt with things without knowing, because they want to give the right, talk about the rights without knowing who they are. So they took the Eurocentric and the American approach without understanding the Indic perspectives or the Indic approach. You get it, right? So I'm not talking about somebody wearing a saffron and coming and saying, like, that is not, Indic or Indian, approach. Rather we believe in somebody who is not without any tilak or like simply wearing, because, our dharma resides and live eternally in our hearts and with our ancestors and with our spirit and like with whomever is going to come and whomever wants to protect the diversity of the land and the mother earth, they will have it. But the very kind of homogenization which took place during Congress era, they didn't want to kind of the additional solicitor general or the solicitor general was not okay with decriminalizing homosexuality at the time. Not even a single gender specific policies or law were passed. I don't know where Shashi Tharoor went during that time. Jagadampika Paul's legislation, no media covered it. Jagadampika
What
Paul's
is that? If you could tell us.
Jagadampika Paul is a BJP MP.
Okay, and what was the
Whose
legislation?
legislation asked for LGBTQ people to be openly. They should the army should allow them to serve in the defense, because in Israel, if you see, Israel is the only country where all these people are allowed to serve in their army. Of course, Indian army, especially our paramilitary force, do have few intersex people through individual court cases. They were allowed to serve, like few people are serving in Sastra Seema Bal now, like they are serving for more than 8 or 10 years. Even in CISF we have a trans men or like lesbian couples and like all that. And but coming back to the is that Jagadampika Paul's legislation didn't got any attention from anybody. Many media covered about. But see what this that's a kind of a stupid piece of legislation. It is not even practical, basically, which was introduced by Shashi Tharoor. It is like, as this book, Why I'm Not a Hindu, or like, sorry, Why I Am, whatever Hindu it is. It is same like that book, it is more comes with a half-baked elitist informations without, lived experience of the person. Uh, the legislation originates from with the kind of elitist view. So the present time, when you see past this legislation during their tenure, they kept quiet at least, so that the 377. I mean, we don't need to make much noise around this. Like what is natural or unnatural, anal or oral, or like penetrating all this things. Like, yeah, at the end of the day, we have a law which kind of which was discriminatory towards certain sections in the society, which was kind of read down. The effects were read down, and the law was interpreted by the Supreme Court. And again, when we see what Mohanji Bhagwat said about these communities or integral part of the society, I mean, that's a big statement from any, buddy who is comparing RSS with, you know, some Baghdadi or Aghdadi group in Iran or Iraq, or some terrorist movements. Can we expect Indian National Muslim League's president, or can we expect a Bishop's Council's chairperson or a cardinal to openly say this, the LGBT people are integral part of the society. We need to accept these people as who they are and what they are. As, the Sashram Chalak of RSS Mohan Bhagawat said, and saffron is new rainbow. Saffron represents Tyaga. Saffron represents sacrifice. Irrespective of certain sections, like it or not, even before the term LGBT, we have the temples and rituals and traditions which will live forever. Irrespective of this, people like it or not, we are living in it. These are living traditions. Nobody is stopping it. We will not allow people to stop it too. We are serving for it. So the most important thing is that this living traditions are shamed by the Congress government, and they never kind of bothered about all this. And whatever they do is a kind of a lipstick activism again, kind of a lip service. Oh, this and that. Let Congress ruling states in India amend same-sex marriage laws. They will face the wrath of whatever they need to face. Yeah. Let Congress ruling states in India first, kind of accommodate the people of diverse SOGI identities in a more dignified way with gender specific laws. Will they? Can they? No, they cannot. All they can do is they can post a status on their Twitter or Facebook, and and they can kind of change the cover picture whom it is going to use, whether it is going to use a 14 years old boy who is leaving his home because of his gender identity. No, it is the Modi government's bill which turned as a law. It is going to help this child to get a residence. We are trying to get the child residence. We have invoked POSCO with Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019 against several trans people who trafficked few trans and non-binary children and who forced them into prostitution and begging and etc., etc. So we are working on it. The sad thing is that the people who are working on the other side have no financial resources, no human resources, or like people to support. All we have is knowledge resources. We kind of try to we have created certain knowledge resources in a more inclusive manner, and we don't want certain diverse kind of a group of people who are highly destructive to control the knowledge resource. And yeah.
Right, Gopiji. I think it's very important, especially for those who are looking at these issues from a distance, to realize that things at the grassroots matter much more than, like you said, very cosmetic sort of an activism. And I think you've brought it out very well in different issues that we've touched upon. I would like to close it there, Gopiji, but it has been a very fascinating discussion. I think we've sort of covered a lot of ground, and I'm really grateful for you to you for throwing light on so many different issues. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And yeah, I hope I was I could do whatever justice I can. So
So,
by
absolutely.
yeah, but anybody who wants to reach us to serve our communities or to know more about this, feel free to reach us. Like, you can give my email ID, or like Srishti's email ID and contact. So people are most welcome to support us, not with money but with their energy and like speak to us, that itself is a support to us. Yeah. Jai
Absolutely.
Ma.
Absolutely. Namaskar, Gopiji, and thank you so much for joining us.
Namaste. Jai Ma.
To our viewers, I would like to request you, please do continue to support us. Subscribe to both our channels, both the Festival of Bharat and Citti Media, because we'll be uploading content on both of these platforms. We'll be back with another fascinating and interesting conversation soon. So stay tuned and namaste.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Citti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.